Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're live. Yes, we're live. Hello, welcome to the Bald Explorer Live. I'm alive. I'm alive. Welcome. We are reading the story of a Norfolk farm by Henry Williamson, and I'm going to try not to fall asleep. It's a very hot day outside, ladies and gentlemen, and I've been over to the lovely Julia's house to help her with some gardening, to cut her grass, to trim a hedge, and to pull up some weeds and get rid of some brambles. And so I spent the morning doing that. She very kindly gave me lunch, which was very nice. And I have hot-foot it back here and had a cup of tea, a nugget of cheese, and I have a coffee on the go now. And I'm hoping that will keep me going. Hello to Adrian from TurboStream. To Steve G, good afternoon to you. Nice to see you. And the other people who are there who are listening but not saying hello. Good afternoon to the lovely Julia. I hope the garden is still in one piece and has not fallen down. So I'm going to try and read this. I hope that my eyes will not cave in. I'm a tad tired too, says Turbo Street. Cycled 19 miles this morning. How long does it take you to do 19 miles? When I was a kid, I used to cycle from Horsham to Worthing, which is 20 miles, and it would take 2 hours. So it worked out 10 miles to the hour. So that's. I mean, I had a 3-speed, heavy, ordinary, bike, and I was about 15, I suppose, that sort of age, 14, 15, I would cycle down to Worthing and back, thank you. So that was another 2 hours. And I would go to do the same thing to my dad. To see my dad, I lived in Horsham, he lived in Godalming, which was about 18 miles or something, and it would take about 2 hours with all the hills. And I would go up there and then I would come back. Edward Moulding, good afternoon to you from MK. Nice to see you. Julia says it's madness. Hello to Linda Kane. 2 hours. I average 10 miles an hour in Birmingham. There we go. It's the same sort of thing. Nothing has changed. And I'm sure you've got 5 gears, if not more. I only had 3 gears on my bike back in those days. It may have taken me longer to get home because that's 40 miles in a day. It's amazing what one does. I don't know that I would want to do that now. Not on the bike I've got, anyway. I'd like a bike that, you could go long distance without feeling that you're actually slogging. And you see some of these people, and they just seem to be not putting any effort in, and they're whizzing along. And that's the kind of bike I want. But these fitness fanatics, I never quite understand them. They ought to get some of these heavy bikes with no gears. Because if you want to get fit, don't get one of these carbon fibre bikes. What's the point of that? I can't understand it. You don't want a bike that makes it very easy to pedal. You want one which is as tough as old boots. Then you only need to go about 4 miles and you're knackered. TurboStream says 21 gears these days, had 3 speeds, Sternly Archer hub as a kid. There you go. 21 gears. What do you do with 21 gears? I mean, 5 gears, I think, is adequate, isn't it? Surely. I mean, 21, surely you don't know the nuance between gear 18 and gear 19. I mean, when would you go, I think I'll just go into 19 now. Good afternoon, Sean Wiltshire. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming along. Jeff Kellison, why is it madness? Lovely Julia. She's got some friends round and a whole load of kids, and they are going bonkers. I got out before they arrived. You'll be pleased to know. This is chapter 6. I become more involved. The low gears help on the hill, says Turbo. Yes, I can understand that. So presumably you can just go up the hills without putting any effort. It's like you just don't. Is that what? If you've got 21 gears? I mean, I used to remember getting into first gear was the high gear. So presumably you've got, something like 10 versions of that, so that you can just keep pedaling and you don't feel the gears at all. I never understood gears on a bike as a kid. Once driving, the idea of them made sense, in Ben Reed. Yes, yeah, that's true. But 21, anyway, it depends what you want to do, isn't it? It's the people who want to get fit. That's what I think, well, don't put that many gears on a bike. But if you want to just go for a cycle ride long distance, and you've got me going again, you've got me started. Bicycles, I can't understand these ones where you've got to be down like this. I can't understand that. Just looking down I know it's aerodynamics and stuff, but really, isn't it nicer to be up here? I wish my bike was more up here. I'd much rather be up and looking about. It would be much nicer. Birmingham is surprisingly hilly and on a plateau. Oh, is it? Andrew Norris says, I have an old bike with no gears, cycled all over the South Counties. Couldn't do it now. Too busy doing this, Andrew. Too busy doing this. You know what I mean. Gold Straw Media says, hello, Richard. It's me. Hello, me. Or have you got something white on your upper lip? Oh, this is which one is it? Here, it's a spot. I've had it for as long as I can remember. It's a spot on the lip, don't know. It never goes away, never changes size. It's not a cancerous thing. It's always there. Sorry about that. It's a white spot. I think what it means is I'm special. I'm special. Yeah, I'm special, all right. Turbo says, I want to cycle touring one day. Yeah, I would like to do that. I just don't want to carry all the stuff, Just want to get on a bike and go. It's like walking. I love the walking. I just don't want to carry everything. Good afternoon to the indescribable text, a name because it's in Russian, from the person in Russia. Hello to you. I can't remember. Is that Julie? Did we have a Julie or someone from Russia? I can't remember. Jeff, I have my desperate friend who lives in an apartment block and 3 kids all in their garden, so they're all racing around. Ben Reeve, in the Scouts, we went to Barn in the Netherlands, and the hire bikes were scary fixed wheels. Gosh, must have been one of the only hilly parts in the country. Forgive me, Andrew Norris, but I will not bet against you being able to do anything. Exactly, Andrew Norris is a superman. What about bikes around the enormously thick tyres that look like motorbikes? Yes, I know. Oh, that's Marina in Russia. All right, thank you very much, Marina. Right, we better get reading, otherwise time will disappear. We've spent 7 minutes just talking and slurping. And the thing is, they call fat bikes. What's the advantage of a fat bike? It must be harder to pedal those tyres. Anyway, here we go. Meanwhile, airmail letters had been crossing the sea to the emigrant Sam, labouring on the veldt of Africa. Also, letters were going from Mr. Stubberfield in Welk, next to the sea, to Messrs. So-and-so in Bedford Square, thence down to Cornwall, returning to London, and so on to Norfolk, and finding me in Devon. Commander Trelawney, I must try and get that right, Trelawney, would not consider an offer of £1,500 for the farm. Can you imagine? Another series of letters. Commander Trelawney would not consider the offer of £2,000 for the farm. Our Devon cottage, a place of hope and anticipation, became filled with doubt and negation once more. The yellow-covered Farmer's Weekly lay on the walnut gate leg table, walnut gate leg table with other papers, and the blue Farmer and Stock Breeder, incorporating farm, field and fireside, lovely title, the Farmer's Express and the Agricultural Gazette joined it. I scanned sales and farms and read over to Letitia accounts of holdings with arable, grass, woodland and streams. Why not farm in Devon? I wrote to several agents, and soon piles of loose paper joined the farming weeklies. Sussex seemed a fine place, and so it is. Also, why not try what they had for sale there? I went to the Silver Eagle to stay with a friend at Shoreham. I know Shoreham. Heard of Shoreham. and from there prepared to look over several farms. The best, called Four Winds Farm, a most attractive name, I thought, with a fine description of oak woods and grassland, wild duck shooting, and a lake where 3-pound trout had been caught, and a herd of dairy cattle with 60-gallon milk contract that could be taken over at valuation, turned out to be a bleak-looking, with modern corrugated iron buildings, a suburban villa for a house, while the wild duck were shot long ago after that they had been hatched under a farmyard hen, and as for the trout, they too had disappeared after being put in a dammed-up pond through which a small trickle moved. Not so good, that one, then. How had they got there in the first place? The farmer thought they had come from the trout hatchery. The previous tenant had turned them in. I felt disconsolately that the glowing mental picture I have of the description was so dulled by reality, I gave up the idea of farming in Sussex. Oh, what a shame. On impulse, I went to Norfolk. Hello, have we stopped? I've just had a text. I've been told, lick my upper lip. Something white on it. Oh, probably a lump of cheese. Is it gone? Thank you very much, Julia. She just texted in. Anyway, there we are. Oh, yes, it was Marina. Thank you, Marina. Sorry about that. I beg your pardon. Also, Richard, what's the point of them MDL? Also, Richard says, what's the point of them MDL? What does MDL mean? I'm reading your tweets. I don't know what that means. Anyway, stream is still going. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. I got slightly distracted. On impulse, I went to Norfolk. A drab journey through London after the road went to the West Country, wretched as it was for the first 50 miles. I stopped again by the old castle and went to look at the farm premises. I knew now what a coombe of barley was, about 200 weight. 4 pecks a bushel, 4 bushels made a coombe. I knew that the rotation in Norfolk was, or used to be, barley, followed by hay, followed by another corn crop, followed by roots for the feeding of cattle and sheep. Straw, hay, straw, roots. Roots, otherwise turnips, had been introduced into England by a Norfolk squire called Townsend, known as Turnip Townsend, and thus English people had fresh beef in the winter months instead of salt beef. The bullocks were kept in the yards, fed on the hay and turnips, and made into fat stock. They trod the straw from the threshold. They trod the straw from the threshed corn stacks and made it into manure, which was spread on the fields in turn. There were no bullocks in the yards of my farm. The mud seemed deeper than before. The man I'd talked to was now driving a cow into the mud. The gates were broken and propped up by bits of wood. I hadn't stopped for lunch, as I wanted plenty of time to walk around the farm and also to see Mr. Stubberfield. Now that I'd come, there seemed no purpose in walking round the wet fields, so I hastened away and called at the office in Welk to be told that Mr. Stubberfield was at another town on Thursday 10 miles away. The clerk pointed it out to me on the map, and I went around a long twisting road through faded-looking town with old brick and flint buildings, with monks walking along the narrow pavement, and a shop with saintly souvenirs, and at length I came to the market town where Mr. Stubberfield was found sitting at a bare table in a bare room in a faded building by the square. Except for the market outside, it could it might have been an evacuated French town behind the lines in 1916, and Mr. Stubberfield, the town mayor, just moved into an empty billet. "Well, sir," he began briskly, "Messieurs so-and-so have now written to say they want 3,000 for the farm. As you know, I have submitted your offer at 2,000, and they've replied that they will not consider it." Thereupon, trusting his country manner and believing him to be simple and honest, I confided in Mr. Stubberfield. I told him my position. I knew, I said, that the minimum of £10 an acre was needed to farm a mixed farm, though 15 was nearer the mark. This would mean at least £2,000. To buy the land or to farm it would take all my capital. Then what about the house? I could not build one large enough for the family of 7 and a partner with an extra room for the secretary and another for a nurse or servant under 1,500. I liked the farm, but it was in my position. I liked the farm, but that was my position. What would he advise me to do? Mr. Stubberfield considered. "You say you have no farming experience. It's a very bad time to be farming, even with experience just now. Indeed, my farmers with experience are wishing that they could get out of it before losing all their capital. I can see you're keen, and frankly, I would like very much to sell you the land, but as you know, it has been let down rather badly, and to get it back will cost money. May I ask you one thing, Mr. Stubberfield, though I feel it may be an impermissible question. Do you think the farm is worth 2,500? Well, I haven't looked over it recently, Mr. Williamson, but I should say, without prejudice, of course, that it's probably something in the neighbourhood of its value, though, mind you, this must not be taken as even a rough estimate on my part. I'm only an intermediately, you know." I felt I must appear a weak fool. I was taking up his time. I was far from home, unsure of myself, entirely out of confidence. Was I about to create another Works? Of course, I had my writing. I could always earn more capital. The family, self-supporting. Going home with a bag of pheasants on my shoulder. I didn't know where home was, but it was somewhere, I heard myself saying, with the thought that I was not actually offering this sum, but only asking if it would be considered. Do you think Commander Trelawney would consider 2,500 for the land? I shall certainly ask him, said Mr. Stubberfield briskly. I'll write straight away. There's time to catch the London post. Your address in Devon will find you, sir. Good day, and though I hope we meet again, if we don't, the very best luck to you. I went down the bare stairs and out into the market square. A man was selling bunches of grapes by holding them up and shouting raucously. There were heaps of clothes laid out on the asphalt, piles of tools, head ropes, pig nets, horse collars, chains and boots. Most of the people were small and simple looking. To be simple, that is, uncomplicated, was to me a virtue. I wanted to be simple like them. There was a sense of permanence about the old town, with its bank built on the florid style of mid-Victorianism, the policeman on traffic duty doing his job without the urgency of life in a large town. Here everyone knew their neighbours. This was the midst of the great barley-growing district of England. I talked to a man with a stall selling cockles on small white plates, a penny the plateful. They were Quickie Blues, he told me. Where had I heard that? Oh, yes, in the book that I had bought from the second-hand bookshop in the Charing Cross Road, written in the leisurely days before the war. As I munched the cockles, not quite knowing if I liked them or not, a four-wheeled harvest wagon, drawn by a pair of horses, went past. "Barley for the mill," said the cockle man. "They still send it up there by horse." I had a second plate of cockles. He refused payment for it. "Pay when you've finished," he said. I noticed a man beside me eating quickly and pulling out a bit of white bread in his hand. He had several plates piled up before him. An old Dutch or German custom, perhaps, brought over by many immigrants to this country. I had a third plateful. Thrown down the coppers on the wooden table as the other man had, and went into the Crown and had some beer. Sitting by the fire and eating a beef sandwich, I began to feel a glow inside me. This was my home, I thought. I was always a stranger in Devon, but here I am among my own sort of people. Was I foolish to have raised the offer by £500? A rich author, perhaps, they thought me. Anyway, I hadn't actually offered the sum. I'd merely asked that if it would be considered. Either it would be considered or it would not. Anyhow, I dare not go any further. When my feet were warmed by the fire, I went out and got into my car with the relief that no one had asked me for a parking fee, and began the drive home. Where should I stay the night? I had a friend about 25 miles away, a connection of Lolita's. Was it Lolita? Lolita? I think that's how we said it was. But did I know him well enough to call in and see him? He'd asked me to let him know whenever I was his way. I would say I was remaining but half an hour when I arrived, and then go. He was a land proprietor in Scotland, and perhaps he would give me advice about buying the farm. The way lay southwest into the wind, which was blowing across England from the white crash of waves flowing in from the Atlantic. Windles and John were playing out on the nursery table by their toy farmyard, wondering what Dad, which was strangely me, was doing about the Norfolk farm. We had talked of little else for weeks, and Windles was already wondering if he could have a tractor or horses, and here was I, filled with fear one moment and hope the next, and completely bewildered by the whole idea, about to spend most of Letitia's money on a part of England as far east from Devon as one could possibly travel. It was a wild heathland through which I was rushing, with plantations of small fir trees extending wide and undulating to the low horizons. The road was straight, and with the surface it had probably had since the end of the war. The sunset was plain and simple, like the character of the people, almost one-dimensional, as linnet, hare, thorn, or partridge. The northern blonde invaders' blood, tamed by the climate and intermingled with the Saxon or Celt, the little Celts who were always defeated, but the northern blonde invaders, got a sentence I need to just work it out. The northern blonde invaders' blood, tamed by the climate and intermingled with the Saxon or Celt, the little Celts who were always defeated but made their best humoured slaves. That sentence doesn't have an end. It's a bit weird. In Devon, the Celtic blood dominated the strains of the blue-eyed Nordic and the hard, dark Norman. In East Anglia, the Nordic strain was clearest. And musing thus, I came to Breckford and decided to ring up my friend at his house before calling upon him. I went to the Bell Inn and asked for tea. While it was coming, I started to write an article for a Sunday paper, which I remembered must be sent off by that evening's post, if it was to be printed in time. I'd seen the skeleton of a pheasant by a straw stack on the farm on one of the farther fields, and I was puzzled about the nicked breastbone, the wing bones which had been picked clean, and all the flesh gone from the skeleton, the frame of which was intact. Could a peregrine falcon have eaten entirely such a bird after knocking it down? I'd seen the skeletons on pigeons on Devon headlands of jackdaws and oyster catchers and razorbills too, after the falcon had done with them, and invariably all that remained were the linked wing bones, with perhaps the primary flight quill or two. The pheasant had been treated in the same way, not dragged about by rats or broken up by a fox or crow or gull, and I wondered if a big falcon, a gyre falcon, migrating from the northern ice fields, had fallen upon the bird and then, standing on it, had plucked and stripped it before perching gorged on one of the pines that I had seen in the wood beside the field. What a thing to suddenly start thinking about. I had got so far with the article while my tea stood cooling on the table before me, when nearby voices overbore my enforced concentration of mind, and at length, with a feeling of exasperation, I put down pencil and paper. The man in riding boots and the woman were having tea at another table. Obviously he was arguing from fixed ideas in which he believed passionately. Should I ask them to be quiet? My article must go off. But the obvious reply was, why didn't I write it in another room? Thank heaven I hadn't even so much as frowned their way. I closed the writing pad and swallowed a cup of lukewarm tea. There's bound to be a smash, the man was saying, as he leant forward intently, his hands clasped together. The system has got to such a position now that it must be either decline with the biggest slump in history and consequent revolution, or it will go to war to preserve itself. This made me mildly curious. Recently I'd been reading Winston Churchill's autobiography and had been struck by his statement that for 400 years the policy of Great Britain had been to prevent the rise of any other great power on the continent of Europe. As every undergraduate knew, nowadays wars were always economic in origin, although by the time of their breakings out, all sorts of human emotions, genuine or otherwise, had usually arisen, and with the rise of feeling, abstract principles of justice, humanity, religion, etc., it obscured the basic facts of the money interests involved, and simple men, often in peacetime, the victims of the economic system, lost their lives in defence of that system. But I wanted to avoid such thoughts in the future. I had written a 500,000-word novel on this theme during the decade after the war. I did not believe that any other war would come about in Europe, and anyway, politics was a career of self-interest. I wished the voices would stop. At last he got up and said that he ought to be going. Could he give her a lift anywhere? She replied that she was waiting to see a man to whom she hoped to let one of the governor's farms. This was interesting, for she was apparently to do with the letting of farms. A land agent, perhaps. Dare I speak to her? She looked sensible and realistic. May I ask you a question? I called across the lounge. If you forgive me for having overheard something about a farm just now. I'm on the edge of starting farming in Norfolk, and perhaps you wouldn't mind if I asked your opinion. Go ahead, she replied, though I can answer you with one word. The word is don't, of course. You've got it. Where's the farm? Up the north coast, 240 acres. Used to grow 14 coom of barley. Now I suppose they thrash all day and take half a wagon load to the barn, leaving 2 or 3 tons of dock and garlic seeds on the field to help the next year's crop. I laughed. Yeah, you've got it. Her decided tones were reassuring. This woman knew her job. She told me she managed 11,000 acres, most of which of them were mortgaged. The only thing that paid were the pheasants, most of which were shot by a syndicate of millionaires. Farming was gone in. 5 years before, in the pit of the Depression, a farm nearly a square mile with a goodish Elizabethan house and 10 or so dozen cottages sold for £1,000. £2 an acre, including all the buildings. No one wanted the land. The tithe was as much as 8 bob an acre, though the owner couldn't let it for 5 bob an acre. So you're an author. I've heard of you, of course. But my dear man, whatever makes you want to start farming? No, you needn't tell me. I know. I'm probably as crazy as you are. The governor and I worry ourselves to death how to get the money to replace one broken tile, and yet it's my ambition to take some utterly derelict land and make a wilderness blossom. It's the fight we like, isn't it? I've been fighting all my life. She was good to talk to, and I liked her forthright manner. The upshot of our talk was that she offered to motor to the farm the next day and give me her opinion of it. She said that she had some work to do in the morning and would meet me at 1 p.m. by the old castle. I asked her to lunch with me and she left. And I stayed the night with my friend, to whom I telephoned. After greetings, he said earnestly, "Don't buy that land. Don't go into farming. It's the worst possible time. And dear sweet Letitia. What will she do? It means an awful life for a farmer's. It means an awful life for a farmer's wife and 5 children too." He told me how some of the best land in his part of Scotland were being taken for munition factories, although a mile or two away was poor land just as suitable. The government is a business government composed of town mines, banking mines, factory mines, reared on pavements and ignorance of the country and country people, and farmers haven't a chance, he declared after we'd had dinner, and we were sitting by the fireside. "My dear old Willie," he went on, "do you realise that 300 acres a day since the last war, more than 18 years ago, have been going out of cultivation in this country? We are growing to be one big town. Farming is finished. It's bound to get worse and worse. So for goodness sake, with all your children to educate, don't ruin yourself by going into farming." In the morning, I returned to Creek, having bought some ham and some beef sandwiches and 2 bottles of beer in Beckford. For once, I was on time for a meeting, and we walked up the hill past the beds of old nettles and the bedraggled thistles to the high ground. Almost everything Miss Gunton saw called forth condemnation. The pasture was thin, poisoned by rabbits. A haystack in one field had not been cut down with a knife, but had its top taken off to save the bother, and it was mouldy. In the next field the small roots were gnawed. Sorry, itchy eye, got to scratch the itchy eye. Otherwise can't read. Something about gnawing. I've lost my space. Oh yes, in the next field the small roots were gnawed nearly level with the ground. Everyone in every row for quite 50 yards into the field. Then every other one was eaten for another 50 yards, and then 1 in 4, white and new-looking. The place was infested with rabbits, declared Miss Gunton. Look at the hedges. When they were cut last before the war, I'll say, it's one long warren, that hedge bottom. Why, even if this starved land could grow corn, you'd lose most of it, half of it, in the plant. The wind blew cold and raw, so we went down into the meadows and walked under the woods where I had seen the shooters knocking out many pheasants. I had not been there before. The way was deep-rutted, water lay everywhere, and as for the adjoining meadow, it was rank and brown with dead weeds. Over it snipe flitted and swerved, uttering their short, scraping cries. Soon it was raining, and we returned to our cars. "It's a wretched place," she said, "and it will break anyone's heart even to begin to put it in order. How could you get a load of muck up those hills? The dour winds, oh! Cold old land, all of it. Why don't you settle inland and rent a farm to begin with? A small one, say 50 acres, and see how you like it. You may loathe it when you've done only 1 year, and it takes at least 3 to get into the stride. I don't agree with what your friend says, by the way. Farming's coming back, and sooner than most people think, though first there's going to be trouble in this country. Well, it's been nice walking over the wilderness with you. Now I suppose you'll go straight to Welk and offer him £3,000 for the darned place." She smiled, and we shook hands, and I thanked her, and found myself slowly going along the road to Welk. To my half relief, Mr. Stubblefield was out. The clerk said nothing had come in since his last letter. My friend had asked me back for the night, and with visions of his hearth and gramophone, I did not put up the hood, but buttoned up the coat around my neck, and in 40 minutes was with him again. "You stick at your writing," he said, when I told him the expert's opinion, and somewhat dolefully I agreed it was sound advice. And that's the end of chapter 6. There's a lot of text out there. What have you been saying? My goodness. So let's have a look. See, Richard looks like he's caught the sun. Yes, I have. It's bloody hot here in Madrid. Yes, I have. I've been out doing some gardening for the lovely Julia this morning, which is why tomorrow's video is a very simplistic one and may fall flat on its face. I don't know, but I wanted to do something basic because I needed some time off from walking and thinking, filming and shooting and editing and all of that. I just needed a day off, although I was very physical at Julia's place, sorting out the hedge and the lawn, but also the weeds that were grown up through the pathway. I'm trying to go further out now. Irby, Otley. Sounds nice. Not easy in this heat, but what views? Oh, you're talking about this cycling. Indeed. All right, there we are. A Greer falcon is a bird of a king or earl. It's colouring like ermine. How do you pronounce that? G-Y-R? Ger, is it? Oh, hang on, here we are. Gaia. Is it G-O-G-I-R? Gaia. Is that what it is? Gaia falcon. Okay. Turbo Stream are chatting to each other. Could we stay on topic, please, so that Richard doesn't lose heart when looking at the comments? Yeah, it is true, because, no disrespect, but... and I do want you to have a nice time. It's just that you look up and you think, oh, hang on, where are we going? Agree. I'm fluffy, lovable old thing now. 57? Fluffable old? Wait a minute, same age as me, mate. But then I was the devil once, care trouble for the elderly ladies, teachers. What? There's no corporate punishment. Anyway, there we go. I don't know whether you were really listening to any of the book at all. I think that's what Julia means. It is difficult. How are we doing on the time? 22. Shall we do a bit more? Chapter 7. So he's been advised. I don't know how far we'll get on this. This book is paper thin. Chapter 7, I find myself in the mud. The next night, I put the Silver Eagle away in the corrugated iron garage next to the cottage at Shallowford, telling myself that if I ever had land, no such roofing would be permitted. Letitia was reading to Windles before the fire in the nursery. She smiled. She looked expectantly at me, but my face was blank because I felt like that. It had been a 260-mile journey, and I was dispirited. No good, I muttered. No farm for us. I was a fool ever to think of it. Oh, never mind, dear, said Letitia. Perhaps it's for the best. Anyway, there's a big post for you and a lot of things from agents. Perhaps there's something for you among them. Sunday on the morrow, and when I came to lunch after... What? Sunday on the morrow, and when I came into lunch after walking up the riverbank and back again, I saw Windles reading a paper on the floor beside John. Caw, it must have been a tisky old hawk to eat up all of that pheasant, he said. And Cool, I bet it is, agreed John, who was 7. Fine article, Dad, said Windles. It was a poor article, really, hurried and forced. I thought I'd overwritten it. Anyhow, it meant 3 guineas less 10%. 8 days later, a letter came from Mr. Stubberfield saying that Messrs. So-and-so would accept £3,000 for the land subject to contract. For several days, Letitia and I talked it over, or rather, I did the talking. She listened and was sympathetic to all I said. And at last, I thought I had to abandon the idea. But a letter came from Dick that afternoon, saying the salmon book was still selling, and had I heard anything more about the farm. He felt it was a good thing, but I hoped that I would not blame him if I bought it and then didn't like it. I replied that the price was too high, and I would indeed be a mug to buy it for £3,000, since I required at least another £3,000 to work it. For some time now, I had been print sick, or rather book sick, and had read little, except the papers. But now I found the lists of second-hand booksellers were interesting, and in that I turned to farming and country books which were written about East Anglia, and especially Norfolk. I cleared out one of my small shelves, giving the books to a girl who called with a car collecting for a new university at Exeter. I bought several books and reread eagerly all descriptions of the North Norfolk coast, though some of them were, as is usual with such literature, written with guidebooks open on the author's desk. I read and reread the details of creaky blue cockles, wild geese, marshes with sea lavender lilac in summer, and the general wilderness of the coast. The picture I got from them was always brighter and keener than those arising from my own observations. I knew I was seduced by the power of words, and it was a willing seduction. I began to understand how some young people reading my books had wanted to meet the author, thinking that some of the effects of reading would be shining about his personality. I had to resist a strong inclination several times a day to telegraph to Welk with that fatal trembling words, "Accept £3,000. By the afternoon's post, a letter came with strange stamps on it, multicoloured, and in a blue words, airmail. Inside, a letter on flimsy paper in Sam's crawling fist. He was enthusiastic about the idea of farming and thought he could manage it, though he would have to learn it. But he was used to outdoor jobs, he declared, and so he was going to switch his course of psychology to the subject of farming. Sam was still apparently studying by correspondence. About this time there was an exhibition of glass drying by coke furnace on a farm north of Dartmoor. I went there and was surprised to find myself among at least 1,000 farmers who had come there in quite 400 cars, most of them pretty smart cars too. This didn't look like agricultural depression to me, though of course Devon was mostly grass farming, with a large extra money spending population in the summer. The idea was to cut the grass. Did he say grass something? Grass drying. I thought he said glass blowing. Sorry, I thought, what the hell is that about? The idea was to cut the grass young, dry it over hot blasts from the coke furnace, then bale it dry but green. Several cuts a year could be taken, and wet weather was an advantage. Oh, is this silage? Is this the silage? Is this the new way of doing silage? The fields must be well manured with chemicals of phosphate, potash, and ammonia. The plant was sponsored by a big international chemical farm, and it was claimed that the dry grass was equal to the finest feeding, and no cake or concentrates were needed for stock fed on it. While the lecturer was telling us about it, I imagined one on my farm in Norfolk, until he said that the West Country was eminently suited for such a process, as it had, unlike the dry climates of the East Counties, plenty of rain to make successful growths of grass. I began to feel depressed at my ignorance, and when the questions were asked, dared to call out, "What do you suggest for the eastern counties? Several shaggy heads... What do you suggest for the eastern counties?" Several shaggy heads turned to look at me, and I felt uneasy, lest they think me bogus, with no right to be there. "What about Lucerne?" he replied promptly, and I nodded as though fully appreciating his suggestion, and sat down quickly, lest he ask me what Lucerne was, which I didn't know. So it happened that afterwards I met an acquaintance who was an agent to one of the estates, and was introduced to his partner, who, on being told that I was thinking of turning farmer, remarked, "Going to lose money you made out of the Tarka? Farming, eh? Which I thought the poorest beginning with which a conversation ended. Sorry, I'm gonna pause there because I'm struggling again. I'm struggling to read. My eyes are tired. It's been a long day. The sun has hit me, and I am making an ass of myself. So before I get myself into a thing, I'm gonna pause there. It's 1:45, and yeah, my eye's stinging. So everything is like very blurred. I've only got the one eye, you see, so it's very tricky. She sells seashells on the seashore. Love these readings. They were very relaxing. Richard's voice paints a good picture. Well, today I'm halting. A halting read. Is that the word? Halting. It's like stop, start, stutter. I so wish I could read so much better. At the moment, I am feeling that I'm not hitting all the marks, and I'm in a very odd place with the Bald Explorer videos, and an odd place with these lives, and struggling at the moment to get my head around everything. But I will get through it. It's just a fug, going through a fug at the moment. What would 3,000 be in today's money? Yes, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? If it was 1941, 3,000 would be 150,000. That's not bad for a farm, is it? Sounds like silage to me, not that I know about country folk. No, and the only reason I think it was silage is because talking to Michael Joseph, who I met the other day when I made that video about the flowers, the English wildflower thing, he was saying that the new techniques, and he must have come around about that time after the Second World War, during the Second World, just before the Second World War, of growing grass, and I am assuming that's what they did, because what they would do is grow the wildflowers and grasses, harvest it, put them up into stooks, I think they were called, and they would dry out, and then that's your hay or straw or whatever. But I think the silage is, as they suggested, it's cut green and early, and so you can get two lots out in a year instead of just the one. I think that's what it was. Still cheaper than the farm conversion I was looking at. Yeah, very pleasant listening experience while driving through the Hannibal, Missouri. You watch out for Hannibal Lecter in Missouri, Jeff Kellison. Nearly called you Jeff Mahoney then. Have a rest, Richard. We're sorry that we have been bad. It's because we're Brummie. No, that's fine. Please don't worry about it. You worked too hard. You were doing great, Richard. You worked hard today. Thank you for taking time. No, it's my pleasure. You're a diamond geezer. I do my best. Your reading videos are great. You are too self-critical. Yeah, you've just found the bit about alpha. Oh, the bit about alpha. Oh, yes, because you said that in your email. Well, I'm gonna stop there, and we'll pick that up and work out what alpha is. They cut it and wrap it in plastic nowadays. Is that what they do with the silage? I don't know, because it's. I always used to think silage was a liquid stuff. I don't know why it's got that until I realised it was cut grass. I thought it was some like fertilizer that's in a, you know, like diarrhea silage. It's just got that sort of liquidy tone to it. But of course, I know it's not. It's this cut grass thing. Oh, here we go. Alfalfa. Alfalfa. Is that what it's called? Alfalfa. Yeah, you see, I'm not. Once I know how a word is pronounced, but otherwise I never quite know. Anyway, thank you very much for coming by. I haven't got to do anything. I've just got to work out where the hell I'm going and what I'm going to make a video of tomorrow. Get my head round things, and also light the SE, which is always a pleasure. And I listen to the Archers, so I know things. Oh yes, that's it. Isn't alfalfa cattle feed? So you're confusing it with sewage. Yes, I was. Yes, I was confusing it with sewage. I think silage and sewage, similar words. But I know now. I mean, I've known it's. I know what silage is for years. I'm just saying, in years ago, I used to think that's what it was. It was this sort of slurry, silage, slurry, sewage. It's all that kind of stuff. Because unless you work on a farm, and silage is a mysterious word, isn't it? Joseph just grabbed my phone and stroked your head, Richard. Oh, that's nice. Cut grass or corn stalks. Ah, there we go. It used to be cut grass, black treacle added. Adds a bit of sugar, I suppose. Alfalfa is used for feed in a lot of countries. What is alfalfa? Is that a chemical? What is alfalfa? Is that, or is that the cut grass? Later, peeps. Yes. Thanks, Richard. It was good. You really got a rhythm going there for a bit. Yeah, this book must suit you. So yeah, no. Yeah, it's just today's not been the best day because I think I'm just knackered and tired and bleached by sun. My bones have been bleached by the sun and my skin is peeling back. And so I'm going to lather myself up with a nice moisturising cream and sit and slither around on the top of the SE Ironheart and frazzle my bottom, my bare buttocks. There's an image that you may not wanted to have planted into your head, but now you have got it. Oh, it's a kind of grass. Ah, right. It's a plant, alfalfa. Oh, okay. Thank you. Yes, probably sunstroke, something like that. Anyway, thank you very much for coming along. I'll see you tomorrow. There's a video tomorrow. It's a bit naff, but, it's a video. And I will be live again, and I'll be a bit more awake, hopefully, and we'll see how we go. But anyway, there we are. Thanks for watching. Take care, and it's been very enjoyable. Even though, even if I stumble a bit, it's still enjoyable, and it's lovely to be able to have a chat with my mates out there in the internet world. So I'll catch up with you tomorrow. Take care. Thanks for coming and watching. Thanks to everybody, to Julia and Judith, if she's there, for just making sure, and catch you soon.